This might be the biggest update for Windows ever. So there's a lot to talk about here. Not only a brand new lineup of the Surface Pro as well as the Surface Laptop, but on top of that, a huge update to not only the software side, but also what you can do with Windows. So there's a few things that we're going to talk about today. Copilot plus PCs are a big one. But beyond that, it is a fundamental sort of rewrite of Windows and what you can do with Windows. It is a brand new chip with the Snapdragon X Elite. And on top of that, a lot of very cool new features. Now, I'll be honest with you, going into this event, I've spent the last couple of weeks trying to wrap my head around things. And there was clearly a big AI sort of reckoning coming to Windows. And that sounds nefarious, but there's a lot of cool features that could have come. And what we've seen here is something that's a little bit more thoughtful, maybe than I had originally expected, and a lot of very cool features that are being enabled by not only the Snapdragon X Elite silicon, but also the way that Windows is sort of evolving. Because I think a lot of rumors going into today were that we're gonna see, oh, Windows 12 and this and that, and that's not what we're seeing, right? This is Windows 11, but it is a much, much bigger update than it might look like on the Surface. Get it, I made a Surface pun.
There are a lot of takeaways, but one of the biggest things to understand is the new name, Copilot plus PCs. Thankfully, it's a really clear, easy to understand name that definitely won't confuse anyone. Except like everyone who already bought a Copilot PC, that doesn't count anymore. You need Copilot plus. But here's the thing, this is a new class of laptops that you're going to be hearing a lot about in the coming months. So the Copilot and the AI stuff is absolutely a big component of everything. But as far as I'm concerned, an equally big part is what enables it, the Snapdragon X Elite. Now Qualcomm has been making chips for Windows for a few years now. They haven't been all that great. You know, the promise is good, all-day battery life, 5G built in, good performance, except that the good performance really wasn't very good. Now, part of this is down to the fact that the 8CX line from before just was kind of generally underpowered. An equally big issue though was with apps. Probably the biggest difference with Snapdragon chips is the architecture. Unlike the x86 backbone that Intel and AMD have been using for decades, Snapdragon uses ARM, which is the standard on Macs, phones, and tablets, but it hasn't really gained traction on the PC. That app support really is the big problem. Every Windows app since the dawn of time has been made with x86 in mind. And unlike Apple, who had the luxury of just announcing to the world that the Mac was switching to Apple Silicon, and if you wanted to stay on Mac, you had to figure it out, well in the end, Microsoft still have to support everything. Qualcomm is not replacing Intel or AMD, they are all going to coexist. So Microsoft is approaching this in two ways. One is just to encourage developers to support ARM processors, such as the Snapdragon X Elite. Now this is the ideal setup to get the most performance, and it does seem like they made some decent headway here. A lot of major apps, such as Chrome, Photoshop and Resolve, and many, many more, either have already added support or are currently working on it. Now, Microsoft made a very interesting claim to me that 90% of average use minutes would be native. That sounds great, depending on what kind of user you are, because apps that are not optimized include basically every game ever and years of older apps that either just aren't ever going to be updated, or maybe they just have too small of a team to deal with ARM just yet. So for that, there's the Prism emulator. Now this is very similar in nature to the Rosetta 2-layer that Apple used to do the exact same thing on the Mac side, emulating older Intel apps on Apple Silicon. And in fact, Microsoft actually claimed that performance is essentially the same as Rosetta. So what this does is essentially emulate pretty much any older app on a Snapdragon-powered device. Now this isn't strictly a brand new thing. x86 and x64 emulation for ARM has been a thing for a little while, but it's been a significantly worse experience. This is for a couple of reasons. The emulation left a little bit of performance on the table, and the previous chips were, well, kind of slow. Both of these things have been improved, meaning that, according to Microsoft at least, thanks to the raw power of X Elite and improved emulation, unoptimized apps should perform roughly on par with a last generation Core i7. Now of course, I definitely want to spend some hands-on time for myself because I'm almost positive that there will be some weird edge cases or apps that won't work or whatever, but in theory, as long as apps run pretty quickly, it'll be essentially seamless to the end user. And when you happen to be running an optimized app, which more and more are coming online every day, then it will be just that much quicker. All of this is a lot of work, but the upside is significant. you should be getting the performance, but also 5G built into some devices, and importantly, significantly better battery life.
So I'm here with the Surface Pro, and let me give you a little demo of some of the AI features. So there are three main ones to talk about. The first, and probably the most impressive, is recall. Now, recall requires a little bit of explanation. So the way that recall works is that using the power of the NPU, it is always paying attention to what you're doing, and is going to help you find stuff that you've done in the past. Now that sounds reasonable enough. Maybe a little bit creepy, but let me show you how it works, and I'll show you how you don't have to be too concerned, hopefully. So this is recall. So this is the basic page, so I can scroll through. And the neat part is, as I scroll back, I can see pretty much everything I've done. Now this is obviously not my device, this is a demo, but you can see I can go back to yesterday, I can go back to the day before, the day before. This will save for as long as you want, provided you have the storage space for it. So the way this works is that the NPU is taking a screenshot of whatever's on your screen every little while. So it's smart, so it's going to be able to only take a screenshot when it detects motion. But what it does is it can determine whatever I am looking at. So this is inside of an Excel spreadsheet. So if I wanted to, I could copy any text or whatever over, or I can just automatically open it up using this button, and it will pull that exact file up. So the way to think about this is the computer is constantly keeping a record of what you're doing, and say I want to go back and find something I did 2 or 3 days ago, or a week or a month ago, theoretically it will do it. So say I want to go look for bread. I know that I was looking at some photos of bread last week or whatever. Well, you can see just how fast it shows up. So I have a couple of different matches. I have text match, so I could pull up any of these things and the word bread was listed. So you can see here it automatically highlights that so I can find that. It'll also give me visual matches. So if I go right here, I can see that it can tell that this is a photo of bread. Now this, I don't probably need to tell you, is a really cool idea because it is constantly taking screenshots of your actual system. You can do this for chats, you can do this for websites, you can do this for apps. Pretty much anything that Windows can take a screenshot of, it can save here. Now, the probably big question you have is, yikes, that's kind of creepy. Now, there's certainly some privacy concerns with this, but let me explain to you the way I understand it, and maybe it might make you feel better, or maybe it won't. When you come up here to the options menu, you can go into the settings, so it's actually built into your privacy and security. There are a number of settings that you have to play with. So first of all, you can just turn this feature off. Now this is going to be only on Copilot Plus devices with the NPU, so the reason for that is that this is all happening locally on device. So none of this goes up to the internet, Microsoft can't see it, it's all encrypted. You could imagine a lot of privacy concerns if that was not the case. So first of all, you can just turn this off. Second of all, you have the ability for the storage, and you can change that. So right now, with the last 2 weeks or whatever, it's only taking about 56 megabytes. And the reason for that is not doing a constant video recording of your screen. It takes a screenshot every little while. It's not always taking screenshots. So the way it works is when it determines that there's some new text on screen, that there's enough pixels that have changed, it'll take a quick screenshot and save that. But if you want, you can set the maximum storage for your snapshots. I was told that 25 gigs, depending on how much you use your system, could be several months of content. Which is cool, but you can change that to be whatever you want. So you can go up to 150 gigs if you want. On top of that, you can also delete anything you want. So say you were just doing something on your system and you don't want to keep the snapshot, well, you can delete it over the last hour, last day, last month, whatever you want to do. And importantly, and something I would 100% do, is set some filters. So you can say, hey, don't take snapshots of Edge. I don't want you to see what I'm doing on Edge, because if you see that I'm watching hours and hours of danky videos, then I don't want anyone to know that. So I'm gonna go ahead and block out Edge, don't take any screenshots. On top of that, if you wanna be a little bit more specific, you can add specific websites. So I'm gonna add YouTube, don't keep track of my YouTube search history, thank you very much. And there, as long as you're using a browser that's supported, it will not do that. This is a big feature. Honestly, one of the bigger features that this enables. And I understand that there's probably going to be a lot of people who are concerned about this from a privacy perspective. The way I understand it is that it is happening 100% on device. At no point does any of this information go to the cloud. So it is encrypted for you on your local device. On top of that, you can use it as much or as little as you want. We'll see how robust the system is. I would be completely lying to you if I said that I was 1000% confident in it at day one, right? But this is a feature that I think has a lot of practical benefits. If I want to go back through and find an email that I was working on a couple of weeks ago, if I want to find a screenshot, or I just literally want to type in the word car because I know I watched a car video 3 weeks ago and it will find that. Like, that's a really powerful feature. Paint is not the most exciting app in the world. However, it's actually got a major new feature in Cocreator. So the way this works is really neat. So again, this is running locally on device. So if I want to, I can just say, car in a tunnel at sunset. So normally, and you've been able to do this in the past, you can just put in a prompt like that and you'll get something spit out. But the way this works instead is that it actually uses that in addition to what you want to draw. So if I start drawing this, I'm gonna have a lot of confidence in my drawing ability. Okay. So if I give that just a second, what you'll see here is that my scribble is obviously terrible, but on this side, this is actually not bad. The idea here is that not only is this being done in device, so this is using the NPU of the system. The only reason you actually need an internet connection for this is a kind of silly one. They want to make sure that you're not doing any nefariousness with this. So what happens is when you give it the prompt, it goes out to the server to make sure that you're not asking it to do anything too nefarious, shall we say. So you do actually need an internet connection for this, but all of the actual processing is happening on device. So if I turn that creativity back up, you can see that the image that I'm getting here, even though this is a terrible scribble, look at that! That looks sick! That is incredibly cool! So if I actually click it, boom, there we go. Live Captions is a Windows level feature that, again, leveraging the power of the NPU on board of the system, allows you to caption anything that Windows can hear. So let me actually show you how this works. So I'm going to turn on microphone audio, and if you look at top here, it will now tell you what I'm saying. So, hello, my name is Austin, and this is what it looks like as you see the live captions being put onto the screen at this time. The cool part about this is that not only does it work with my microphone, it obviously will work with anything that I'm listening to. So the way this works is really cool. It's able to use that, and importantly, it will do live translation. So we got a demo earlier of someone who fluently moved between English and Spanish. It paused like half a second and immediately started translating that Spanish. These are just some of the things that are made possible with an NPU. You're gonna hear that so much, but the idea that you have real AI horsepower running locally on device at super low power. So if I actually pull up Task Manager, you can actually see how little power it takes. So my CPU and my GPU are essentially not even being used, right? So I've got 4% on my CPU, 1% of my GPU, and the NPU is doing what, 3-4%. It's almost nothing to be able to do something as you'd think complex as doing live captions and translations. So these are just some of the AI features that are being built in. But importantly, these are just the ones that are built into Windows on day one. Because the NPU is now a first-class citizen in Windows, there are so many more things that I'm sure will be coming down the pipeline. And of course, so many third-party apps that can leverage this kind of tech to do all kinds of stuff with almost no latency and to be able to do it with theoretically quite a lot of security.
At a baseline, Microsoft is branding and spending a lot of money to promote these as the gold standard of PCs. To get the Copilot Plus branding, you'll need a couple of things: 40 TOPS or more on your NPU and 16 gigabytes of RAM, which of course you'll find on the new Surface models, as well as a number of other OEMs who are also taking part. Now, as of right now, this basically means that the system needs to be powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite device, but soon there will be other Snapdragon and AMD options, as well as Intel coming a little later this year. Now, if 40 TOPS on your NPU doesn't mean much to you, well, you're probably not alone. Honestly, it's probably worth me making an entire video breaking down TOPS and processors and why you're going to be hearing these phrases everywhere going forward. But the short answer is this. Just like how in the past when you're shopping for a PC, two of your biggest considerations when it comes to performance are your CPU and your GPU. Well, it's time to add the NPU to that list.
So when it comes to hardware, there is a lot to go over. So let's start with these brand new Surface devices. So we have two. We have the brand new Surface Pro. Technically, this is just the new Surface Pro, although it is really the 11th gen, as well as we have the new Surface Laptop, which is the 7th generation. So there is a much more substantial redesign of the laptop. So it now has a much larger screen to body ratio. You can see just how small these bezels are. And I'll be honest with you, the 13.8-inch version looks sick, because I've always liked the Surface Laptop, but it's kind of been a little bit big and chunky. But now this is the 15, but even the 15 is significantly smaller. Now what's really interesting about both of these devices is that they are Snapdragon only. In the past, there was a little bit of a mix between you had AMD on certain options until there was the 8CX before. All of that is gone. It is just Snapdragon X across the board. Now, both these devices start with the Plus, although if you upgrade, you do get the Elite, which is basically the same chip, 10 core versus 12 core, a little bit of extra performance. Now, That I think is very telling when it comes to how strongly Microsoft feel not only about the Copilot Plus initiative, but also just about what they're getting with Qualcomm and Snapdragon. Because you can think about the conversations that are being had with some of the other partners, such as AMD and Intel. And while there, of course, will be additional Copilot Plus PCs, Snapdragon and Qualcomm, I think, should be very happy that they're getting this sort of shine, because there's a lot of emphasis on the Surfaces going Snapdragon first, at least with these devices. So let me break it down. I'll go over the actual Pro itself. So you have a few options here. So there's an improved webcam. You also now have an OLED if you upgrade. So the base model still is an LCD, but if you go up to the Elite model, you do get an OLED. There's also the actual keyboard, which has been changed. So this version is the slightly higher end version, which has, I can carefully take it off without knocking it over. It actually works wirelessly now. So there's actually 3 keyboards, just slightly confusing. There's the base keyboard, there's the keyboard with the pen storage, and then there's this, which will allow you to not only use it via Bluetooth, but also folds up nice and neat here. It's a cool feature, although it's a little bit on the pricey side, and I'll continue to state forever that I wish that every Surface came with the keyboard in the box, because I can't imagine who would buy this without a keyboard. Now, outside of that, the hardware is actually relatively similar looking on the Surface. It is still with a fan inside, it's actively cooled even when you've got the Snapdragon Silicon, but it makes sense, right? This one, straightforward. The laptop, I think, is a little bit more interesting. So you've got a really nice port selection. So you've got a couple of USB 4, you've got USB-A, aux, thank you for keeping the aux, as well as you've got yourself the Surface connector, and on the 15, you've got yourself a micro SD. That alone is great. It also does have the upgraded touchpad, as does the high-end keyboard on the Surface Pro. You've got a quite nice keyboard, I will say, on the laptop. It feels pretty good. And the display. So it's a 120 Hz display. I'll be honest with you, when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, that OLED looks great. And then they told me, nope, it's LCD. I am legitimately surprised. It is a very nice looking display, very bright. If I crank up this brightness, it is going to probably clip the camera real hard. Like, it is properly bright. Now, a big reason why this is LCD, I think, is price. Both the Surface Pro as well as the laptop start at $999. And that's not some like super basic configuration. They come with the Snapdragon X Plus, and importantly, 16 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. One of my traditionally biggest issues with the Surface lineup has been that the base models were next to useless because 8 gigs of RAM is just not enough for anybody, especially when it comes to Windows. So both of these models come with 16 gigs, 256, honestly a very usable spec. Of course, they'll be a little bit more expensive once you start upgrading the SSDs and go up to the OLED and blah, blah, blah. But like, you're not gonna be able to get either of these configurations in any kind of like terrible, unusable state, right? And I think that is something to be applauded, even though upgrade pricing could be a little bit cheaper. Something else I think is really worth mentioning is upgradability and repairability. So the Surface Pro still has a little upgrade door for the SSD, which is nice. Now, the Surface laptop has no such door. It does have an upgradable SSD that will void your warranty, but you can actually get at it, of course, by voiding your warranty, so you should do it 366 days later. The feet are actually magnetic. So instead of using like glue to keep the feet on, they're actually magnetic. They come off and then the screws underneath and you pop off that back panel. One of the only things they've actually removed is a little bit of a weird one. It no longer supports the pen on the Surface laptop. Now, I think a big reason for that is that you actually had to have these little tiny wires across the screen for the actual pen, for the capacitive touch and whatnot. It's still a touchscreen, mind you, but it is no longer compatible with the pen. So just a small note. Of course, if you really want to use the pen, you should be using the actual Surface Pro 9. Now, 9? 11? Yikes, I'm a couple years behind. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to hardware is the actual breadth and depth of the ecosystem. Yuck. So on top of these Surface devices, which of course we're getting early hands-on of, there are going to be a number of other OEMs, including Samsung, including Lenovo and Dell and all kinds of people, Asus, who are going to be announcing devices probably around the time this video goes live. The only one I can personally speak to is the Lenovo Yoga 7X. Now, hypothetically, I may have been able to spend some time with this before the embargo, and this is also a Snapdragon-powered device. Now, my sample is very, very, very early, so I'm gonna not speak on it a lot, besides the fact that a lot of these same features, a lot of these same sort of advantages in using the Snapdragon Silicon do come across to that. So even though these Surfaces look very impressive, and I will say that the price point is worth really reiterating, right? I think they're being very aggressive with $1,000 configurations of laptops that are actually good, unlike previously where you had to spend $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 to get something usable. But I will say that Yoga 7X, stay tuned. I'm gonna be taking a look at that once it's not quite so in such beta form. But the time that I've spent using the Snapdragon X Elite, it's the real deal. I think that's kind of sort of my general thought. There's a lot of performance there. You have obviously all the cool Windows AI features, but on top of that, it just feels snappy and fluid in a way that typically you only get when you're running with, a big beefy CPU and GPU and yada, 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 right? Like, what you're getting here is performance. You're getting a lot of really cool features, and importantly, devices that the fans are almost never kicking on. The battery that is actually legitimately all day.
So when Apple Silicon dropped in 2020, it was an absolute game changer. It wasn't just about the performance leap, which was really substantial. It was also about the incredible battery life, paired with the fact that you got full performance even when you're unplugged. As much as you may or may not want to actually use a Mac, since 2020, MacBooks really have set a new benchmark. Now, are these Snapdragon-powered systems going to give us that same leap? Well, in all honesty, probably not, at least immediately. My understanding is that you'll still see some power management from Windows when you're running on battery, which will cut performance a bit when you're unplugged. But this is a massive step forward. The competition between Qualcomm, Intel, AMD, and Apple is an arms race where we, the consumers, are the real winners. In the past few years, we've seen more improvements to laptop performance and battery life than in the entire decade beforehand. And believe me when I say that Microsoft didn't rebuild huge chunks of Windows just for a few random Snapdragon laptops. It really does seem like ARM-powered Windows devices are the future, and we'll likely see everyone from Nvidia to AMD join the party before too much longer. I mean, who doesn't want a laptop with performance and battery life? Now, are there concerns? Absolutely. My hands-on time with the X Elite has been limited by very unfinished software and hardware. So while my initial impressions are really promising, we absolutely have to wait for the final products before I can make a definitive judgment. There are a lot of questions, and there's also a lot of legitimate concerns, specifically when it comes to the emulated app performance and really how quickly developers actually want to embrace ARM. Not to mention, there's probably gonna be a lot of hesitancy with a lot of, I don't want to say like average consumers, but like a lot of people are used to buying laptops with an Intel or an AMD sticker on it, and as soon as you drop a Snapdragon badge, well, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot to a lot of people. So my expectation is that it might be a little bit of a slow ramp on these things. But here's the thing. Microsoft is betting big on ARM, and they're really the last holdouts. Mobile and Mac have been switched over for a while, and it seems natural that Windows is the last domino to fall here. Now, I'm not saying that you should drop everything and toss your existing laptop in the garbage just yet, especially because Intel and AMD are not only improving things at an impressive rate, but they also will have their own Copilot Plus PCs that have all the AI goodies that you ever hope for. But here's the thing. This is a big deal that is really worth keeping an eye on because things are moving at an incredibly rapid rate.
So that, my friends, is a look at what you've got with these brand new Copilot Plus PCs. If you really break it down, it's very simple. These devices are going to have significantly better battery life, they're more efficient, they're going to run cooler, quieter, and there's still going to be tons and tons of performance on tap. On top of that, there's also a huge amount of new features when it comes to the Windows AI stuff. So, you think about some of the stuff, this is sort of V1 of, right? Like, we're gonna see more and more apps take advantage of the NPU. We're also going to see more and more features on Windows to take advantage of this sort of overall architecture change. There's a lot to sort of wrap your head around here, but it's sort of at a core level, this is a very big moment for Windows. It's a very big moment for Microsoft. And while I'm sure there are gonna be people who are like, hey, why wasn't it Windows 12? I think the main reason for that is that you kind of do need this NPU to enable these features. And I can't imagine Microsoft bringing out Windows 12, and it only works on these brand new systems, right? So I think that's the reason why we've seen this first step. But you gotta assume that the next major version of Windows is gonna take all of this for granted and add a ton of additional features. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm very curious. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the ding-a-ling button. But until next time, my friends, I'm gonna go creatively borrow some devices. It's fair game if I want to do an extended test, and I'll see you back at the office when I'm, able to give you a full review of the devices that I'm gonna give back eventually.